Hi and welcome to the second part of this DCP Blender 3D beginners tutorial. So let's go ahead and load up Blender, and there's two ways to retrieve our previous work. You'll notice down the right hand side here we have like recent files, so we could click blender part1.blend and that will load up our last Blender file. But sometimes this recent file, sometimes we want to load up really old work that we've done previously. So you can click here and load up the last file. So let's click that and you'll see the 3D text. The other option is to go to File, Open, and then we can navigate to that same file where we saved it previously. So blender part1.blend and click Open and we'll get our 3D text open again. Let's go to File, Save As, and this time we're going to save it as version 2 or part 2. So in this second part, I just want to show you how to give this text object some color. Let's give it some vibrancy, right? It looks a bit plain and it just doesn't look very good at the moment. So at the moment, as default, Blender will have this sort of grey background, and we want to make the background black and we want our text to be a color so it stands out. So the first thing we'll do is go to the world settings here, world. So think of the world settings, literally what it states is the settings for the world, and there's only really one option in here that you're going to change is the color. In future tutorials, when we go through more complex stuff, we'll show you some more ways of using the world settings, and we can set up volumetric light. We can do some amazing stuff, right? But for now, we just want to click on the world settings here, click on color and set it to black. Set it to black like this. And at the moment, inside Blender, we're looking at the 3D viewport from a certain perspective, a certain render type, you could say. Think of it that way. We're looking at it. You can see these little options here. So we've got wireframe, we've got solid view, we have look dev view, and we have render view. So these are different options within Blender that we can select to see this object in different views. So if we click wireframe, we see a wireframe. If we click solid view, we see a solid view. If we click look dev, this one is a little bit more tricky to explain. Look dev is basically temporary lighting. It's temporary lighting. It's a little bit tricky to explain, but we'll understand more about that in future tutorials. And then finally we've got render view. So when we click render view, we now see the black because we set the color to black for the world settings. See black here? We set that color and now it's showing everything, all the background is going to be black. This text doesn't have any material. So objects in Blender require materials, just like thinking like maybe your t-shirt or your jumper, it has a material, right? And that material has a color. So we can set objects in Blender, we can give them materials and then we can set colors to those materials as well. So if we were to click on this text here, let's just see. Down here we have something called material, right here. So if we click on material and this text has been selected, we can give this text a specific material now. So what we can do is go to new. So we'll click new, and normally what I do, and I would advise you to do this, is name. So click inside here and call this text. Let's do it lowercase, text material. So give this material a relevant name because it belongs to text. Let's call it text material. And for now, we can just change the base color. So this is called base color. We can click here and we can change it to a different color. So we can set it to like blue or red or green or whatever color we want. Let's set it to like a purple sort of color. It's really hard to see at the moment, right? The text is just hard to see. So what we're going to do is position our lighting better. Our lighting is not in a great place. So if we zoom out a little bit and click on our light source, you'll see the light is here. It looks like it's off at an angle for number 1. And if we press number 7, when we look at number 7, you can see the light source is behind the object and it's off to the side. So that's not helping our positioning of our lighting. So let's click on the move tool here. We'll click on the light source and we'll drag it to the center here and we'll drag it forward in front of the object. Then we'll press number 1 on our keyboard. That takes us to the front view, and then we're going to drag that light source down so we can illuminate the object better. So now the object is illuminated better and now we can see the text is being illuminated much better because this light source is in a better place. If we drag the light all the way away, it's going to be very dark because the light is not casting any, well, this object's not receiving any light. But as we drag that light source closer, we can illuminate it. This could be an animation here. You could just have this light source flow over it and the text would highlight, and that could be a part of an animation sequence. You could actually do that, right? But for now, we're just going to drag the light to around here, then press Control and Z, and that moves it right back to where we wanted it. So whenever we move an object and we don't like its position, press Control Z to undo that last step. So our text is now illuminated, but we want to give it a bit of I need to explain one thing actually. If we click up here in render view, we've got render engine Eevee, and as default when you load up Blender, it's using a render engine called Eevee. This is a new render engine. It's called a real-time render engine. It's just a quicker way to generate 3D animation. It's not perfect by any means. There's another option called cycles, and cycles will give you more realism. So if you want to create an object that looks really like realistic, like photorealistic, cycles is much better. But if you just want to do like a 3D animation for your YouTube intro, or you're doing something that doesn't necessarily need to look 100% realistic, then Eevee is quite a good engine to use because it's very fast. It's much more efficient than cycles, but cycles is much more powerful. So it's kind of a weighing up option there, right? So when we click on render here, we can do things like turn on bloom. These are, think of these options here like enhancements in a way, yeah? There's different enhancements we can add to our scene. We're not adding this to the text, we're adding it to the scene, so it'll affect everything in this scene. So let's turn on bloom, and if we move this light source closer, you'll see we'll get more bloom. So as we move the light source closer, what's happening is this light is hitting the object and then it's generating this bloom. So we can move the light backwards and forwards, and now we illuminate the text this way. So let's move the light to around here, then press Ctrl Z and we'll move it back to this point. And we can increase the power of our light, we can decrease the power. We can click on this little drop down menu here and we can change the threshold for the bloom. So we can reduce the threshold so it gives more bloom across the object. We can reduce the need. This is like little sort of fading around the edges, we can think of it. We can increase the radius and decrease the radius. So sometimes I decrease it quite a lot and just have like a little bit of bloom like this. We can increase the intensity and decrease the intensity, and we can actually change the color of the bloom here as well. So we can change it to a different color. If we leave it as white, then it kind of just uses the natural reflection of the light that will generate the bloom. So here we can see this bloom, right? And you notice that the light source is in front of the object. So when we look at it from behind, it's very dark, and when we look at it from the front, we can see a lot more of the text here. And as we move this, we can get this sort of bloom effect. So what have we done so far? We've made the background black because I think that will look good. We can make it white if we want, so we can go back to our world settings and we can change it to white. And we'll have white background with this 3D text. Sometimes we want to animate text and we want a white background. Sometimes we want a blue one or any color. We're going to pick any color we want. But in this case, we're going to have it black. We want it black. Okay. So with this text here, it's got quite sharp edges, you can see. So what we can do is go back to, we can click on this 3D text, go back to the 3D object data here for the text. And there's another option in here, I didn't show you this, called the Bevel. So with the depth, we can set a depth of bevel here. So normally I set it to like 0.4 or 0.2. And then the object will have a rounded edge or a beveled edge. You can see this beveled edge. So as I reduce the bevel to 0, it will have no beveled edge. And if I increase it, keep increasing it, it gets a bit silly when it gets too high. But we can set it to something like normally I set it to like 0.2, the beveled edge, something like this. Then we've got this little beveled edge, and that helps with our light source. Now our light is reflecting off of these edges, and that helps to give our 3D text a bit more, a bit of a better look and feel. Right now we're getting these little reflections off of this light source. Let's drag this light up a little. Actually, let's click on the light source, light, click on it, and then we drag it up a little bit here. So around here, here's fine actually. Then we get little lights or little light source reflecting off of these edges. Because we've got edges now, the light will hit those edges and then you'll get a little bit of illumination, and that just helps to give a bit more of a 3D feel to our text, right? Now, the light source itself, we can click on it, and the light has metadata or object data. So when we click on light, there's a light bulb here, and that represents the light source, and we can increase the power of this light source. Let's bring it right down, right? So if we set it to 0, the light is off. There's no other light source in this scene. So just like if you're standing in your room and you've got the curtains closed or whatever, and you turn off the light, it's going to be pitch black. But if you turn the light on in your room, you're going to start to see things. So we can increase the light. We can set it to like 100, and then it's very bright, and you get these jagged edges and stuff like this. It's not looking great. I'll explain sort of like how to fix things like that later in future tutorials, but this light source is way too bright anyway. So we want to set it to around 10. So we'll set the light source to 10, and then we can turn off things like shadows. Can you see inside here? We can tell the light source to cast or not cast shadows, and I think having shadows gives the 3D text a bit more of a 3D feel, because when you turn on a light in your room, if there's an object quite close to that light, it's going to cast a shadow, just like when you're walking outside and it's really sunny day and you look down, you'll see a shadow of yourself, right? It's that sunlight that's hitting you as an object and then casting the shadow. Just the same, this light source is casting the shadow. The light can't really get inside of here when it's hitting. If the light was going in this direction, it wouldn't really hit the inside, right? Because the light can't get to that, so that's why it's casting the shadow there, if that makes sense. And as you move this object, the shadows, the light source, as you move it, the shadows will change, and so will the bloom, like this, right? So what we might do, let's move the light source to here, then press Control Z. Control Z will move it back to its original place. And really, there's not a huge amount. Look, there's tons more to explain in Blender, but from a basic perspective, we've learned quite a lot. We're able to rotate around objects, we're able to pan objects left and right, we're able to move up and down around them, we can rotate around them, we can zoom in and out, we can do all of that stuff. We can create 3D text, we know how to position that text on the scene. So we've done quite a lot, we understand quite a lot. In a few basic tutorials we've managed to do quite a lot, but let's do one thing that's really important, and what we want to do is position our camera. We want to put our camera exactly where we want it to be. If we press 0 at the moment, press 0 on your keyboard, that's what the camera sees. And we want the camera to be looking almost from the front of this text, right? From its front perspective. So the easy way to do that is press number 1 on your keyboard. So number 1 takes you into front right orthographic. And to position the camera into, let's, how can I explain this? We're looking at it from front orthographic, so we're looking at it from this perspective, and we want to get the camera to look at it from what we can see right now, not where it's currently positioned. To do that, we press Control, Alt, and 0. So let's get our keyboard up. We're going to hold down the Control key, hold down the Alt key, and then press 0. So hold down Control and Alt, then press the 0 key. Remember, 0 is for camera, and what Control and Alt does is tell the camera to move to the current view that we can see. So Control, Alt, and then 0, and now you can see this little dotted line. This is what the camera can see right now. So the camera isn't perfectly positioned. You can see the text is off to the side a little bit. So the text is in the right place, but the camera isn't. So let's click on the camera here, click on this camera right at the top here. You can see it goes orange, and there's a few different ways we can position the camera. What we can do is we can press the letter G. G stands for grab, so we want to grab an object. So if we go back to our keyboard, I'm pressing the letter G, and G allows us to grab this camera. Because we've clicked on the camera, we can press G, and then we can just use our mouse to move, and we're not moving the text, we're moving the camera. So let's try and get our text roughly sort of in the center of this camera. So we kind of want an even space at the top, at the side, at the bottom, and at this side here. So that's roughly centered out now. And to get it to a perfect center, we'll click on the object data. So we'll click Camera, Object Data. And now we can see the exact X, Y, and Z locations. So the X location will be on the horizontal, so we can set that to 0. So click on it and set it to 0, and it will nudge it to the side, and now it's bang in the middle, right? The Y location is going to be how far the camera is backwards and forwards, and we don't want to set that to 0 because 0 will put it right here. We want to bring this one, we can actually fluctuate, we can move it to wherever we feel like. We want to kind of move it to this sort of position. The Z location is going to be the height, the up and down, right? How high is the camera and how low is the camera. So for now, let's set that to 0. So we'll set that to 0. We set this to 0, and the camera is rotated, or the camera is rotated at 90 degrees. So if we rotate it, let's see. Yeah, it's rotated at 90 degrees. So really, we want to leave this at 90. We never really want the camera to be exactly flat, but let's use these tools to get a better perspective of this text. I want the camera to almost be looking down at the text from an angle. So to do that, I'm going to move it on the Z-axis upwards. So when I move it on the Z-axis upwards, in this upwards direction, I can see the top of the text, but the camera is almost looking forwards. It's not really looking at it at an angle downwards. So I'm going to rotate this camera down. So I'm going to rotate it down, let's say to around, let's set it to around any number will really, it doesn't really matter too much, around this 67, 68. Let's set it exactly at 68. Then I'm going to move the Z-axis like this. So I'm just using these two, the Z and the X rotation and the Z location, to get the camera to look at it from this sort of perspective. And then we can use the Y to move closer, and then we can use the Z to move up and down. We want to look at it from this sort of perspective, something like this where we're looking down. If you look at it from straight on flat, it's not going to look very good, your text, but it will look better when you're looking at it from this sort of perspective. So the other thing I want to do is create a few additional light sources, because one light source is never great. In Blender, your text isn't going to look that amazing, right? Although this text is quite basic. Let's press another shortcut you should always remember is Control S to save. So always keep hitting that Control S as you're doing your work. But let's test something now, right? So we've moved our camera from its original location to this location. So when we press F12, so we're going to press F12. F12 is our render key. So we'll press F12, and now we can see the 3D text like this. And it looks much better than when it was looking at it from an angle, but it's not amazing right now, right? You can still see that these black edges at the top, and it just doesn't quite look right. So let's fix that. We need more light sources in here. So one light source that we can add that will illuminate all of the text is called sunlight. So we'll press Shift and A on our keyboard, and we're going to go to light, and we're going to add a sunlight. Now the sunlight will behave like a real sunlight. So if we zoom out a little bit, we grab our move tool and just drag this sun object above, right? So this sunlight is pointing down at this text, and you can imagine the sun is above your head and it's coming downwards. That's how you need to think about it. So imagine if you're standing here, the sunlight is here and it's pointing down towards this text. Now you can see all the text is uniformly lit because the sun is hitting all of this text, but we've still got this bloom object in here to give us some of this bloom effect, right? So we can turn objects off and on in this scene. So here you can see this little eye, this little icon here, the eye. So we've got a light object here and we've got a sun below it. So we have to click on the light object and turn off the eye. We can see what the text looks like without this light source, only the sunlight on its own. Then if we turn that one back on, we can turn off the sunlight. We can see what it looks like without the sunlight. We can even turn the text off. We can't really turn the camera off because the camera is the camera, right? We can turn it off in this scene, but you're just hiding it from your view. So we can turn things off and on. We can also turn them off and on in the render. So right now, if this is like the render options, when you press F12, these ones right on the far right hand side, we can turn off the text, the light source, and the light here. In fact, let's just leave the text on and the light here. So we've turned off the sunlight here, right? So you can see the text is illuminated like this, but if we were to press F12, it will look, you can still see the black shadows here at the top. But if we go back to our render or our viewport here and turn this option on, we're telling Blender to use all three of these elements. When we press F12, we'll see the text looks like this now, and it's rendered out looking much better, right? Looks better. That's what we want. I still think the camera is looking a bit too much of an angle from the top. So let's sort that out. So let's click back on our camera. Sometimes we need to adjust things as we work. So we'll click back on our camera, click back on the object data. We want to rotate this upwards a bit more. So to something like maybe 83 degrees, right? Let's set it around 83 degrees and then use the Z axis to bring it down. Because I think it's going to look better at this sort of perspective. We was looking at it too much of a steep angle. At this sort of perspective, it's going to look better. So let's press F12 again, and now we can see that render like this. So what have we done so far? We've added another light object, which was the sun object, right here. And sometimes when you click on objects, you can't really see where they're positioned. You need to zoom out to see that up here. Then what did we do? We added a bevel to the text. So we added this little bevel edge, and you can see the sunlight is hitting that and just gives the 3D text a little bit more of a better look and feel. We put some color to this text, right? We also positioned the camera, and we rotated the camera and got it into the exact position we want, which is what it is right now. So if we want to change the color of the text, click on the text, go to its material here, click on material, click on the base color, and change it to blue if you want. Change it to any color you want. I quite like this blue, this like sort of turquoisey sort of blue. So now this is more like turquoise, right? This is more like a shade of blue. You can change it to any color now. You can manipulate that using the material. So the text object itself is an object. The material you're applying to that object, and you can apply many materials. It doesn't have to be one material. You can use something called the node editor or the shader. That's kind of more complex, and we'll look at that in later tutorials. But for now, this is our 3D text, and this is what it's going to look like. That's the end of this particular tutorial. In the next tutorial, I'm going to show you how to animate the camera and how to animate this text, and then also how to animate one of the light sources. So we're going to go through and create our final 3D animation, and we do that in the third part of this Blender tutorial. I hope you enjoyed this tutorial, and I look forward to seeing you in the next tutorial.